Late afternoon at the outdoor wedding reception, roses everywhere. Sunlight filtered through the rose arbor, turning everything gold and soft. Vanessa's mother smiled that particular smile, the one Rowan recognized instantly. Too sweet, too deliberate. "You came alone again, Rowan." The question landed like a blade between his ribs. He should have said yes, should have owned it with dignity. Instead, something old and familiar opened inside him. The wound he thought had finally closed. His throat tightened. The silence stretched too long. Before he could force the words out, a quiet voice beside him spoke. "I'm with him." His eyes found her Iris, the woman who'd handed him a napkin earlier when his glass slipped. She met his gaze with something that looked like understanding, like she'd seen exactly what was happening, and decided he didn't deserve to bleed in public. The lie began. Not out of strategy, out of mercy. The wedding reception had started 20 minutes earlier. Rowan stood near the champagne table at the edge of the rose garden, watching crystal glasses catch the afternoon light. Late spring warmth hung heavy in the air, carrying the scent of roses and fresh-cut grass. Laughter drifted from clusters of elegantly dressed guests, the kind of effortless social grace he'd never quite mastered. He'd come because declining would have looked worse than attending. Because 3 years should have been long enough to stop caring, it wasn't. His hand reached for a glass, fingers stiff with tension. Condensation made it slip. The crystal tilted, champagne threatening to spill across his pressed white shirt. Before he could steady it, a cloth napkin appeared in his peripheral vision. Here he looked up. A woman stood beside him, dark hair pulled into a loose braid, wearing a simple sage green dress that looked nothing like the designer labels, filling the reception. She held out the napkin with a small, apologetic smile. Her eyes were hazel warm, with fine lines at the corners that suggested she smiled often. "Thank you," he managed, his voice rougher than intended. She steadied his glass while he dried his hand, her fingers careful where they touched the crystal stem. Her touch was brief, gentle, when she stepped back. She didn't linger or introduce herself, or ask the question everyone else had been asking all afternoon. "Who are you here with?" She just smiled once more, a soft upward curve of her lips, and moved toward the roses. Rowan exhaled slowly, something in his chest loosening. The panic that had been building since he arrived, the familiar tightness in his throat, it eased. Just slightly. Rowan watched her go, something quiet settling in his chest. Kindness without agenda. He hadn't felt that in longer than he cared to admit. Then Vanessa's mother appeared in front of him, all silken diamonds and that smile he'd learned to dread. "Rowan, darling, so lovely you could make it." Her eyes scanned the garden behind him, searching. "You came alone again." The words shouldn't have stung. They did, every time. Alone again. Like it was a failure. He kept repeating. His jaw tightened. Heat crept up the back of his neck. He opened his mouth to say yes, to end this quickly and with dignity. But his throat closed. The silence stretched, her smile sharpened. Behind her, he could see Vanessa near the fountain in her white wedding gown, her hand resting on Philip's arm, watching, waiting. Then that quiet voice spoke again. "I'm with him." The woman from the beverage table stepped beside him, close enough that her shoulder almost brushed his. Her expression was calm, her gaze steady on Vanessa's mother. Rowan's pulse stuttered. "What?" Vanessa's mother blinked, surprise flickering across her face before she smoothed it into politeness. "Oh, how lovely. I don't believe we've met." Iris Callahan. She extended her hand with the same easy grace she'd offered the napkin. "Rowan and I have been seeing each other quietly. We prefer to keep things private." The lie came out so naturally, Rowan almost believed it himself. Vanessa's mother took Iris's hand, her eyes narrowing just slightly, searching for cracks. "Private? How refreshing." The words dripped with skepticism. "And what do you do, Iris?" "I own a bookshop in town, rare and restored books mostly." How charming, the dismissal was clear. Vanessa's mother's gaze flicked to Rowan, then back to Iris, assessing finding her unremarkable. Safe to ignore. She excused herself with a thin smile and glided toward another group of guests. Rowan exhaled slowly. His hands were shaking. Iris stayed beside him, her posture relaxed, her voice low. "You don't have to explain. I saw what was happening." He turned to look at her. Really look at her. Soft features, warm hazel eyes. The kind of beauty that didn't demand attention but settled into you quietly. "Why did you do that?" His voice came out rougher than he intended. She met his gaze without flinching. "Because no one should have to bleed in public." The words hit him square in the chest. She'd seen it, the wound reopening, the humiliation waiting to spill out. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded once. Then she glanced toward the path leading away from the reception. "I can disappear now if you'd like. I don't need to complicate things." Wait, the word came out before he could think. "Stay, please. Just for a little while." Something flickered in her expression. Hesitation. Then she nodded. They stood together in silence. Two strangers bound by a lie that felt more honest than anything Rowan had said in months. The next morning, Rowan stood in the botanical dye garden behind Hartwell Estate, his hands stained indigo blue. Morning light spilled across rows of woad plants and madder root, turning the workshop windows amber. He'd been up since dawn, trying to lose himself in work the way he always did when his mind refused to settle. It wasn't working. He kept replaying yesterday, the wedding reception, Vanessa's mother's question, the way his throat had closed, and then Iris stepping in without hesitation, offering him a way out he hadn't asked for. Why did you do that? Because no one should have to bleed in public. His chest tightened at the memory. He didn't even know her, didn't know why she'd been at the party, or why she'd chosen to protect him. All he knew was her name, and that she owned a bookshop somewhere in town. He needed to find her to thank her properly, to explain that she didn't owe him anything, that the lie could end here. By noon, he was standing outside Callahan's Rare Books on a quiet street in Hudson. The shop was small, tucked between a cafe and a vintage clothing store. Through the window, he could see shelves of leather-bound volumes and soft light pooling on worn wooden floors. He pushed the door open. A bell chimed softly. Iris stood behind the counter, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing a cream sweater and jeans. She looked up from a book she was repairing, her hands gentle on the torn binding. Recognition flickered in her eyes, then something else. Wariness, maybe. Or surprise Rowan. She set the book down carefully. "I hope this isn't intrusive." He stayed near the door, suddenly uncertain. "I wanted to thank you." For yesterday, she studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. Then she came around the counter, wiping her hands on a cloth. "You didn't have to come all the way here for that. I did." He paused, searching for the right words. "What you did, it was kind. I don't know why you helped me, but I'm grateful." Her gaze softened. "You looked like you were about to break in half. I couldn't just stand there." The honesty in her voice undid something in him. He swallowed hard. "I'm sorry you got pulled into my mess. It's not a mess." She leaned against the counter. Her arms crossed loosely. "It's just life being complicated." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Then Iris spoke again, her voice quieter. "If you want to end the pretense, I understand. I can disappear. No one needs to know." Rowan opened his mouth to agree. That would be simplest. Cleanest. But then he thought of Vanessa's mother's face, the skepticism, the way she'd looked at Iris, like she was irrelevant. And he thought of Philip, Vanessa's new husband, who'd watched them from across the garden with that same calculating expression. What if we didn't end it? The words came out before he could stop them. Iris blinked. "What?" "Philip, Vanessa's husband. He was watching us yesterday. He's the type who needs to prove he's right about everything. If we just disappear now, it'll confirm what they're all thinking, that I made it up, that I'm still not enough." He hated how pathetic it sounded, but it was the truth. Iris's expression shifted, not pity. Something closer to understanding. "What are you asking?" "There are 3 more events over the next 2 weeks. A formal dinner, a charity gala, a farmer's market gathering. Philip will be at all of them. If you came with me just to those 3 things, it would give me time to prove I've moved on, that I'm fine." The lie tasted bitter even as he said it. He wasn't fine, but he could pretend to be. Iris was quiet for a long moment. Her gaze dropped to the book on the counter, her fingers tracing the torn binding absently. "You want me to be your fake girlfriend for 2 weeks?" "Yes." He forced himself to meet her eyes. "I know it's asking a lot. I can pay you, compensate you for your time." "No." The word came out sharp. Her eyes snapped back to his. "I don't want money." "Then why would you agree?" She hesitated. Then she said so quietly he almost missed it, "Because I know what it feels like to be measured, and found wanting." The admission hung in the air between them. Rowan's chest ached. He wanted to ask what she meant. Who had made her feel that way? But he didn't have the right. "I'll do it," Iris said finally. 3 events, 2 weeks. Then we're done. Relief flooded through him. "Thank you." She nodded once, her expression unreadable. But we need rules, boundaries. This stays simple. No real feelings. No complications. Agreed. They shook hands across the counter. Her palm was warm, her grip firm. And Rowan told himself this would be easy, that he could keep his distance. That 2 weeks of pretending wouldn't change anything. He was already lying. The formal dinner was set for Friday evening at the Westbrook family estate. Rowan picked Iris up at 7, his hands tight on the steering wheel of his truck as they drove through the Hudson Valley hills. She sat beside him in a simple navy dress, her hair pinned up loosely, a small silver necklace catching the last of the daylight. She looked elegant, understated. Nothing like the women Vanessa used to introduce him to. All sharp edges and designer labels. "You're nervous," Iris said quietly. He glanced at her. "Is it that obvious?" "Your knuckles are white." He forced himself to loosen his grip on the wheel. "Philip's good at this." The polite interrogation. "Making you feel like you're on trial without ever raising his voice. Then we'll handle it together." Her voice was calm, steady, something in his chest eased. Just slightly. They arrived at the estate 20 minutes later. The house was all stone and iron gates and manicured lawns that screamed old money. Rowan parked near the circular driveway, his stomach twisting. Iris touched his arm lightly. "Breathe. We've got this." He nodded. They walked to the entrance together, his hand hovering near the small of her back without quite touching. Inside, the dinner party was already in motion. Crystal chandeliers, mahogany furniture, servers gliding through rooms with trays of champagne. Vanessa stood near the fireplace in a red dress, her hand on Philip's arm, smiling that practiced smile Rowan used to think was genuine. Philip saw them first. His eyes narrowed slightly, then smoothed into polite interest. He excused himself from the conversation and crossed the room. "Rowan, good to see you." He extended his hand. His grip was firm, deliberate. "And you must be Iris." "I am." She shook his hand without hesitation, her smile warm but reserved. "Vanessa mentioned you two have been seeing each other quietly." The word hung in the air, laced with skepticism. "How long has it been? A few months?" Iris said smoothly. "We met at an estate sale. Rowan was looking for antique leather samples. I was looking for a first edition Audubon." The lie was so specific, so confident, that even Rowan almost believed it. Philip's smile didn't reach his eyes. How romantic. Estate sales. Sometimes the best things are found in unexpected places, Iris replied evenly. Rowan felt something shift in his chest. She wasn't intimidated, wasn't trying to impress Philip or win his approval. She was just there. Present.com/Philip. Studied them for a moment longer, then gestured toward the dining room. "Shall we? Dinner's about to be served." They followed him through the house. Rowan's pulse hammered. This was it. 2 hours of polite conversation and loaded questions, and Philip watching them like a hawk, waiting for them to slip. They were seated across from Vanessa and Philip. The table was set with fine china and too many forks. Rowan's hands felt clumsy as he reached for his water glass. Under the table, Iris's foot touched his lightly, a small, grounding pressure. He glanced at her. She met his gaze and gave him the smallest nod. "You're not alone," dinner began. The conversation flowed around them, mostly safe topics. The weather, the upcoming charity gala, someone's recent trip to the Amalfi Coast. Then Philip leaned forward, his eyes on Rowan. "So, Rowan, still doing the leather restoration work?" "I am." "Fascinating. Such a niche craft." The word niche sounded like an insult. "Must be difficult to make a living from it." Rowan's jaw tightened. "It's sustainable. The estate supports itself. Of course, family money helps." Philip smiled. "But it must be hard to compete with modern manufacturing. I imagine fewer and fewer people care about heritage craftsmanship these days." The implication was clear. "You're irrelevant. Outdated." Rowan's throat tightened. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Then Iris spoke, her voice steady. "Actually, there's been a resurgence of interest in artisan work. People are tired of disposable goods. They want things that last. Things made with intention." She turned to Rowan, her gaze warm. "Rowan's work is beautiful. I've seen some of his restored pieces. The detail, the care, it's rare." Philip's smile thinned. "You're a fan of his work then." "I'm a fan of people who create things that matter." Iris didn't look away. "There's integrity in that." The table went quiet. Vanessa shifted in her seat, her eyes flicking between Philip and Iris. Philip leaned back, his expression unreadable. Well, how fortunate Rowan found someone who appreciates him. The words were polite, the tone wasn't. Rowan felt something crack open inside him. Not gratitude, something deeper. Iris had defended him, not his work him. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. By the time dessert was served, Rowan's hands had stopped shaking. As they left, Philip walked them to the door. "We should do this again. I'd love to get to know you both better." It sounded like a threat. In the truck, Iris exhaled slowly. "He's relentless. I told you." Rowan's voice was rough. "Thank you for what you said in there." She turned to look at him. "I meant it." Their eyes held. Something passed between them. Something neither of them could name. Rowan looked away first. His chest felt too tight. 2 weeks, he reminded himself, then this ends. But he was starting to wonder if that was still true. 3 days later, Rowan arrived at Iris's bookshop, just before closing. Rain drummed against the windows, turning the street outside into a blur of gray and silver. The afternoon had dissolved into early evening, streetlights casting amber pools on wet pavement. He stood in the doorway, soaked through water, running from his hair down the back of his neck. The brown paper package in his hands was beginning to soften from the moisture. Iris looked up from the register, surprise flickering across her face. Her hair was down today, falling in soft waves past her shoulders. She wore faded jeans and an oversized cream sweater, sleeves pushed up to her elbows. "Rowan, what are you doing here?" "I brought you something." He crossed to the counter, water dripping from his jacket onto the worn wooden floor. Each step left wet footprints. His shirt clung to his chest, cold and uncomfortable, but he barely noticed. She took the package carefully, her fingers brushing his. The brief contact sent warmth up his arm. "You didn't have to open it." She unwrapped the paper slowly, methodically, the way someone might who understood the value of taking care. Inside was a leather-bound journal. The cover dyed a deep forest green with subtle gold tooling along the spine. The leather was soft, supple, restored by hand with the kind of attention that only came from love of the craft. Iris's breath caught. Her fingers traced the design, following the delicate patterns he'd tooled into the surface. Vines, leaves, small flowers that took hours to get right. "This is Rowan, this is beautiful. It's 18th century French binding. I restored it last month." He watched her hands on the leather, the reverent way she touched it. "I thought you work with books every day, saving them, preserving them. You should have something that lasts." She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I can't accept this. It must be worth. It's a gift." His voice was firm. "Please." She held his gaze for a long moment. He could see her throat working, emotions crossing her face too quickly to name. Then she nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Rowan." Shifted suddenly aware of the water pooling at his feet, of how completely soaked he was. His jacket dripped steadily. "I should go. You're closing soon." "Wait." Iris set the journal down carefully on the counter, her fingers lingering on the cover for a moment. Then she moved toward the back of the shop. "You're soaked. Let me get you some tea at least. You'll catch cold if you drive home like that." "You don't have to." "I know." She disappeared into a small room behind the counter. Rowan stood there, dripping and uncertain, his hands hanging awkwardly at his sides. The shop was quiet except for the rain, a steady rhythm against the glass. Shelves of books surrounded him, floor to ceiling, their spines cracked and loved, and worn smooth by time. It smelled like old paper and leather, and something faintly floral he couldn't place. Lavender, maybe, or old rose petals pressed between pages. Iris returned with 2 mugs of tea, steam rising from the surface in delicate curls. "Chamomile," he realized as she handed him one. She gestured toward a pair of worn armchairs near the window, upholstered in faded burgundy velvet. They sat. The rain continued outside, softer now, gentler. The shop lights were warm, golden, creating a small pocket of safety against the wet darkness beyond the windows. "Why did you really come?" Iris asked quietly. Rowan wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the warmth seep into his fingers. "I wanted to thank you for the dinner. For what you said, I told you. I meant it." I know he paused, searching for words. "But no one's defended me like that in a long time." Iris was quiet. Then she said, "Philip was trying to make you feel small. I couldn't just sit there and let him. Most people would have. I'm not most people." The simple statement landed between them, true and undeniable. Rowan looked at her. Really looked. The soft curve of her jaw, the way her fingers curled around her mug, the quiet strength in her posture. "No," he said quietly. "You're not." Their eyes met held. Iris looked away first, her cheeks flushing slightly. She took a sip of tea, then changed the subject. "The gala is tomorrow night." I know his stomach tightened at the thought. "Are you sure you still want to do this?" "I gave you my word." She met his gaze again. "I don't break my word." Something warm spread through his chest. "Neither do I." They sat in comfortable silence, the rain a steady rhythm against the glass. Outside, the street was empty. Inside, the world felt smaller, safer. When Rowan finally stood to leave, Iris walked him to the door. "Be careful driving home," she said softly. "I will." He hesitated, then added, "Thank you for the tea, for everything." She smiled, small but genuine. Anytime he stepped out into the rain. As he walked to his truck, he glanced back once. Iris stood in the doorway watching him go, the journal clutched against her chest. Something in his chest pulled tight. 2 weeks, he told himself again, but the lie was getting harder to believe. The charity gala was held at a renovated industrial space in the city. All exposed brick and Edison bulbs and carefully curated vintage furniture. Rowan arrived with Iris on his arm, her hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow. She wore a simple black dress, her hair swept to one side, a pair of small pearl earrings catching the light. She looked beautiful, effortless, ready. She asked quietly. They entered together. The space was crowded, filled with the kind of people who donated money to be seen donating money. To be seen donating money, a string quartet played in the corner. Rowan scanned the room. Vanessa stood near the bar, laughing at something a man in a tailored suit was saying. Philip was across the room, deep in conversation with an older couple. Then Philip's eyes found them. He excused himself and began moving through the crowd. Rowan's pulse quickened. "He's coming, I see him." Iris's voice was calm. Her hand tightened slightly on his arm. Philip reached them with a practiced smile. "Rowan, Iris. So glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," Rowan managed. Philip's gaze moved between them, assessing. "You two seem comfortable together. How long did you say you've been dating?" "A few months," Iris said smoothly. "And yet, no one's seen you together until recently." Philip's tone was light, conversational, but the skepticism underneath was unmistakable. "That's unusual. We value our privacy," Rowan said. "Of course." Philip's smile didn't waver. "Still, it's interesting. Vanessa mentioned you were quite solitary after the words hung in the air, after she left you." Rowan's jaw tightened. He crept up the back of his neck. Before he could respond, a woman's voice cut through the tension. "Rowan Hartwell. I thought that was you." A woman approached, tall and angular, wearing a designer gown that probably cost more than Rowan's truck. Her smile was sharp, predatory. "Camille," Rowan said stiffly. "It's been ages." Camille's eyes swept over Iris, dismissive. "And who's this?" "Iris Callahan," Iris said, extending her hand. Camille took it briefly, her grip limp, charming. "What do you do?" "I own a bookshop." "How quaint." Camille turned back to Rowan. "I heard you were still tucked away at that estate of yours, doing your little leather projects." "Little projects." Rowan's hands curled into fists at his sides. Philip watched with polite interest, clearly enjoying the dynamic. Camille continued, oblivious or uncaring. "I always thought you had so much potential, Rowan. But you insist on staying in that dusty workshop instead of doing something well relevant." Iris's posture shifted, barely perceptible, but Rowan felt it. "Relevant," Iris repeated, her voice dangerously quiet. "Well, yes, something modern. Something that matters in today's economy." Camille waved her hand dismissively. "Heritage crafts are lovely hobbies, but they're hardly sustainable, actually," Iris said, her tone still calm, but edged with steel. "Heritage crafts are experiencing a renaissance. Museums, collectors, restoration projects, they're all seeking artisans with Rowan's level of skill. What he does isn't a hobby. It's preservation. It's keeping something beautiful and meaningful alive in a world that's forgotten how to value craftsmanship." Camille blinked, her smile faltering. Iris continued, her gaze steady. "And frankly, I'd rather spend time with someone who creates something lasting than someone who measures worth by market trends." The silence that followed was thick. Philip's expression shifted. Something like annoyance flickered across his face. Camille recovered with a forced laugh. Well, someone's passionate about old leather. I'm passionate about integrity, Iris said simply. Camille's smile went brittle. She excused herself quickly, disappearing into the crowd. Philip watched Iris with new calculation. You're quite protective of him. I don't tolerate people being condescending for sport. Iris met his gaze without flinching. Philip's jaw tightened, then he smiled again, cold and sharp. Fascinating. Well, enjoy the evening. He walked away. Rowan exhaled shakily. His heart was pounding. You didn't have to do that. Yes? Iris said quietly. I did. He turned to look at her. Her cheeks were flushed, her breathing slightly uneven. She'd been angry for him. Why? The word came out rougher than he intended. She met his eyes. Because you deserve better than people who measure you by their narrow definitions of success. The honesty in her voice undid him. His chest ached. He wanted to reach for her, to pull her close, to thank her in ways words couldn't capture. Instead, he said quietly, no one's ever stood up for me like that. Then you've been surrounded by the wrong people. Their eyes held. The noise of the gala faded. For a moment, it was just them. Then someone bumped into Rowan from behind, breaking the spell. Iris looked away, her hand slipping from his arm. We should probably circulate. Make it look convincing. Right? His voice sounded hollow. They moved through the crowd together. But something had shifted. Something neither of them could name. And Rowan was beginning to realize that keeping his distance was no longer possible. The farmers' market gathering was supposed to be casual, relaxed, just a Saturday. Morning stroll through vendor stalls with Vanessa's extended social circle. Rowan met Iris at the entrance, the late spring sun warm on his shoulders. She wore jeans and a cream linen blouse, her hair loose, a canvas tote bag over her shoulder. She looked softer than at the formal events. More herself. Morning, she said with a small smile. Morning, he fell into step beside her as they entered the market. The air smelled like fresh bread and strawberries and cut herbs. Vendors called out from their stalls, offering samples and prices. Families wandered past with strollers. Dogs on leashes sniffed at the ground. It felt normal, almost real. They walked slowly, pausing at stalls that caught Iris's attention. She examined handmade soaps, fresh flowers, jars of local honey. Rowan found himself watching her more than the market. The way she smiled at a vendor's elderly mother. The way her fingers traced the petals of a peony. The way she laughed, soft and genuine, when a toddler accidentally bumped into her legs. She was beautiful. Not in the sharp polished way Vanessa had been, but in a way that settled into him quietly. Naturally, you're staring, Iris said without looking at him. He blinked. Sorry. She glanced at him, amusement in her eyes. It's fine. Just making sure you're paying attention. Philip's here. Rowan's stomach dropped. He followed her gaze. Sure enough, Philip and Vanessa were across the aisle, browsing a stall of artisan cheeses. Of course they are, Rowan muttered. Iris's hand found her fingers laced through his. Warm and steady. We're fine. Just keep walking. The touch sent heat up his arm. He told himself it was for show. That she was just playing the part. But her hand fit perfectly in his. They continued through the market. Philip and Vanessa didn't approach immediately, but Rowan could feel them watching. At a flower stall, Iris paused, her attention caught by a bucket of white roses. They're beautiful, she said softly. Rowan pulled out his wallet. How much for a dozen? The vendor quoted a price. Rowan paid without hesitation. Iris turned to him, surprise in her eyes. You didn't have to. I wanted to. He took the wrapped bouquet from the vendor and handed it to her. Her cheeks flushed. She looked down at the roses, her fingers careful on the stems. Thank you. You're welcome. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Something warm and fragile and terrifying. Then Vanessa's voice cut through the moment. Rowan, what a surprise. He turned. Vanessa stood a few feet away, Philip beside her. She looked polished as always, her sundress perfectly pressed, her smile perfectly measured. Vanessa Rowan's voice came out flat. Her eyes moved to Iris, then to the roses in her hands. Something flickered in her expression. How sweet. Philip never buys me flowers at markets. He says they die too quickly. Some things are worth it even if they don't last, Iris said quietly. The words hung in the air. Philip's eyes narrowed. You two seem quite comfortable together. For a relationship that's only been, a few months? When you find the right person, time doesn't matter as much. Iris replied evenly. Vanessa's smile tightened. That's optimistic. It's honest, Iris said. Philip stepped closer, his gaze fixed on Rowan. You know, I've been thinking. It's interesting how quickly you moved on. After everything, Rowan's throat tightened. People heal, do they? Philip's tone was conversational. Or do they just find convenient distractions? The accusation was clear. You're not over, Vanessa. This is fake. Rowan's hands curled into fists. He wanted to defend himself, to prove Philip wrong, but the words stuck in his throat. Then Iris stepped closer to Rowan, her shoulder brushing his. Healing looks different for everyone. Some people move forward, others stay stuck, obsessing over what they can't control. The implication was unmistakable. She wasn't talking about Rowan. Philip's jaw tightened. Vanessa's expression went cold. Before anyone could respond, Iris turned to Rowan. We should go. I want to get these roses in water before they wilt. He nodded, grateful for the exit. They walked away together, Iris's hand still in his. Once they were out of earshot, Rowan exhaled shakily. Thank you. Again. You don't have to keep thanking me, Iris said softly. I do, because I don't know how to do this without you. She stopped walking, turned to face him. Her eyes searched his. Rowan, I mean it. His voice was rough. These past 2 weeks you've been the only thing that's felt real. Her breath caught. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Iris stepped closer. Slowly, her free hand lifted, hesitant, and rested against his chest. Rowan's heart hammered beneath her palm. May I? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded. He lifted his hand and touched her cheek. Her skin was warm, soft. She leaned into the touch just slightly, her eyes fluttering closed. The world narrowed to this, her hand on his chest, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, the warmth between them. Then she opened her eyes and stepped back, her expression unreadable. We should go, she said quietly. Rowan's hand fell to his side. Right? They walked to the parking lot in silence. But something had changed. The line between pretending and real was blurring, and neither of them knew how to stop it. 4 days later, Rowan sat in his workshop long after sunset. The botanical dye vats simmered on low heat, filling the air with the earthy scent of woad and madder root, mineral and organic, combining into something ancient. Indigo stained the wooden counters, permanent reminders of years of work. His hands moved automatically, checking temperatures with a thermometer, adjusting ratios in his notebook, stirring the vats with long wooden paddles worn smooth by use. But his mind was elsewhere. On Iris, on the way she'd looked at him at the market 4 days ago, on the feel of her hand in his, warm and certain, on the roses he'd bought her, white and perfect, and the way she'd held them like they mattered, like he mattered, on the fact that their agreement was almost over. One more event, the brunch at Philip and Vanessa's, then she'd walk away, back to her quiet bookshop and her carefully restored volumes. And he'd go back to being alone in this workshop, with nothing but leather and dye for company. The thought made his chest ache, made his hands still on the paddle. He'd told himself at the beginning that 2 weeks would be enough, that he could pretend and then let go, that Iris was helping him prove a point, and nothing more. But somewhere between the formal dinner and the gala and the farmer's market, pretending had stopped feeling like pretending. Her hand in his had started to feel necessary. Her voice had become the thing he listened for. Her presence had filled spaces in his life he hadn't realized were empty. And now those spaces would be empty again. A knock at the workshop door startled him. He looked up, his heart jumping. Iris stood in the doorway, wrapped in a thick cardigan against the evening chill. The light from inside the workshop caught her face, soft and uncertain. I'm sorry, she said, her voice small. I know it's late. I tried calling, but you didn't answer. He crossed to her quickly, wiping his hands on a cloth, his pulse racing. Is everything okay? I don't know. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. I needed to see you. I couldn't wait until the brunch. His stomach tightened. Come in. She stepped inside, her eyes taking in the workshop like she was memorizing it. The leather samples hanging from racks, organized by type and age. The vats of dye bubbling gently. The tools arranged on workbenches, each in its place. The restored pieces waiting for final finishing. The smell of earth and mineral and old leather. This is where you work, she said softly, running her fingers along a piece of restored leather, 18th century binding that he'd been working on for weeks. Most days he watched her move through the space, the way she touched things carefully, respectfully, the way someone might touch art in a museum. It's beautiful. All of it. She turned to face him, the dye vats glowing behind her, amber light making her hair look almost copper. You create beautiful things, Rowan. Thank you. His voice came out rougher than he intended. She took a breath, her hands twisting in front of her. Rowan, I need to tell you something. His stomach dropped. This was it. She was going to tell him the brunch was off, that she couldn't do this anymore, that pretending was too hard. What is it? He asked, his voice carefully neutral. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression torn. Then she said so quietly he almost missed it. I'm scared. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and raw. Of what? He asked gently, taking a step closer. Of this, she gestured between them, her hand trembling. Of how real it's starting to feel. We said 2 weeks. We said simple. We said this was just to help you get through some social events. But I don't think it's simple anymore. His chest constricted. Iris, I know, she interrupted, her voice shaking. I know you're still hurt. I know you're not looking for anything real. I know this was supposed to be pretend. But I need you to know that I'm starting to care about you. More than I should. More than is safe. The honesty in her voice, the fear and hope tangled together, it broke something open inside him. Something he'd been holding tight since Vanessa left. Since he'd decided being alone was safer than being vulnerable. Rowan crossed the space between them in 2 strides. His hands lifted, hovering near her face, asking permission, trembling with want and fear in equal measure. May I? He whispered, his voice breaking on the words. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes, catching the amber light. He cupped her face in his hands, his palms rough with calluses, stained with indigo that would never completely wash out. Her skin was warm beneath his touch, soft, real. I'm scared too, he said quietly, his thumb brushing her cheekbone, of wanting this. Of believing it's real, of letting myself feel something that might be taken away. Why? Her voice was barely audible. Because Vanessa, she left me because I wasn't impressive enough. The words came out broken, jagged. Because my work, my life, it wasn't the version of success she wanted. It was small, unremarkable, not enough. And I've spent 3 years telling myself that if I'm not enough for someone like her, someone who supposedly loved me, I'm not enough for anyone. Iris's hands came up to cover his, her fingers wrapping around his wrists. You are enough, Rowan. You're more than enough. His throat burned. How can you know that? You barely know me because I see you. Her voice was fierce despite the tears streaming down her face. Not the version of you that someone else wanted. Not the man you think you're supposed to be. Just you. The man who creates beautiful things with his hands. Who treats old leather like it matters. Who helps preserve something meaningful in a world that throws everything away. Who's kind even when people are cruel. Who's genuine, even when it would be easier to pretend. And you're everything. The words shattered his last defense. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, to change her mind, to protect herself from him. She didn't move, didn't flinch, just waited. Her eyes on his, trust written in every line of her face. Their lips met, soft, tentative. A question more than a declaration. Are you sure? Can this be real? Will you stay? Iris's hands moved to his shoulders, steadying herself, pulling him closer. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, catching the tears that had spilled over, salt and warmth against his skin. The kiss deepened, just slightly. Her mouth opened beneath his, and he tasted salt and warmth and something that felt dangerously like hope. Then he pulled back, his forehead resting against hers. His hands were shaking. His breath came in uneven pulls. I don't know how to do this, he whispered. Neither do I. They stood there, wrapped in each other, the workshop quiet around them. Finally, Iris stepped back. Her eyes were red, her voice was unsteady. I should go stay. The word came out desperate. I can't, not yet. I need to think. He nodded, even though everything in him wanted to argue. She reached up and touched his face once more. A goodbye, a promise he couldn't tell which. Then she was gone. Rowan stood alone in the workshop, the taste of her still on his lips, and he realized he'd been wrong about something. This wasn't pretending anymore. This was real, and it terrified him. The final event was a late brunch at Philip and Vanessa's estate. Intimate, just a dozen guests. The kind of gathering where every word would be scrutinized. Rowan arrived alone. Iris had texted earlier saying she'd meet him there. He'd read the message 3 times, searching for subtext. Finding none. He parked his truck and walked to the entrance, his stomach in knots. Inside, the atmosphere was elegant and suffocating. French doors opened onto a sunlit terrace. A long table was set with white linens and fresh hydrangeas. Guests mingled with mimosas and polite laughter. Rowan scanned the room. No Iris. Philip appeared at his side, a drink in hand. Rowan, glad you could make it. Where's your lovely girlfriend? She'll be here, of course. Philip's smile was thin. You know, I've been thinking about you too. About your relationship. Rowan's pulse quickened. Oh, it's just interesting. The timing, the convenience. Almost like it was designed to prove something. The accusation was clear. You're lying. Rowan's jaw tightened. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. Philip's tone was light, dangerous. I'm just observing. Vanessa and we've built something real, something solid. I'd hate to see you waste time on something less substantial. Before Rowan could respond, the door opened. Iris stepped inside. She wore a pale blue dress, her hair swept up, her expression calm. But Rowan saw the tension in her shoulders. She crossed to him, her hand finding his. Sorry I'm late. Philip's eyes moved between them. No apology necessary. We were just talking about the nature of real relationships. Iris's grip tightened on Rowan's hand. Were you? Yes. What makes them last? What makes them genuine? Philip gestured toward the terrace. Shall we sit? I'd love to hear more about how you two met. They moved to the table. Rowan's heart hammered. Brunch began. Conversation flowed around them, safe and surface level. But Philip kept circling back, asking questions that felt like traps. How did you know Rowan was the one? What's your favorite thing about him? Where do you see this relationship going? Iris answered each question with grace, but Rowan could feel the tension building. Then Philip leaned forward, his eyes locked on Rowan. Here's what I'm curious about. You two have been together for months, supposedly, but you haven't told us one truly intimate detail. Nothing that would prove you actually know each other. The table went quiet. Philip smiled. So let me ask you this, Rowan. What's Iris's greatest fear? The question hung in the air. Rowan's throat closed. He didn't know they'd shared moments, touches, confessions, but he'd never asked her that. He'd been too focused on his own wounds to see hers clearly. The silence stretched painful, exposing. Philip's smile widened. That's what I thought. Rowan felt the trap closing, felt the humiliation rising in his throat. He was about to retreat, to confirm everything Philip suspected. Then Iris moved. She turned to Rowan, her hand lifting to his face. Her eyes held his, steady and clear. It's okay, she whispered. Then she kissed him. It wasn't tentative like before. It was deliberate, intentional. A declaration in front of everyone. Her mouth was soft against his. Her hand trembled against his cheek. He tasted the truth in it, the courage it took to choose him publicly. When she pulled back, she didn't look at Philip. She looked at Rowan. You don't have to prove anything, she said quietly. Not to him, not to anyone. The table was silent. Philip's expression had gone cold. Iris stood, her hand still in Rowan's. We should go. Rowan nodded, unable to speak. They walked out together, leaving half-finished mimosas and shocked silence behind them. In the driveway, Iris finally let go of his hand. She wrapped her arms around herself, her breathing uneven. Thank you, Rowan managed, for saving me again. She turned to face him. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I didn't do it to save you. Then why? Because I'm tired of pretending. His chest constricted. Iris, I need to tell you something. Her voice shook. My greatest fear. The one Philip asked about. It's that I'll always be the safe choice. The woman men settle for, while they're still hung up on someone else. The placeholder, the second option? The words hit him like a physical blow. She continued, her voice breaking. And I thought I could do this. Thought I could help you for 2 weeks and walk away unscathed, but I can't. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped pretending. I started falling for you. And I don't know if you're ready for that. If you even want that. Rowan's world tilted. Iris sighed. This was supposed to stay simple. She interrupted. That's what we agreed, but it's not simple anymore. At least not for me. He heard the finality in her voice. The exhaustion. She was done waiting for him to figure out what he wanted. I understand if you need time, she said quietly. if you're not ready, but I can't keep doing this halfway. I can't keep pretending we're something we're not, when all I want is for it to be real." She took a step back, then another. "Iris, wait, I'm sorry, Rowan. I really am." She turned and walked to her car. He watched her go, paralyzed, his mind racing with everything he wanted to say and couldn't. She drove away, and Rowan stood in the driveway alone, realizing he'd just lost the most real thing he'd had in years. 3 days passed. Rowan didn't sleep, not properly. He'd lie in bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, replaying every moment from the brunch. The way Iris had kissed him, the way she'd whispered, "You don't have to prove anything." The way she'd looked at him afterward, tears in her eyes, telling him she was tired of pretending. He didn't eat more than he had to. Toast, coffee, things that required no thought, no decision. His stomach stayed tight, a permanent knot of anxiety and regret. He worked in the botanical dye garden from dawn until his hands were too stained to continue. Indigo and madder root seeping into the creases of his palms under his fingernails. He restored leather until his eyes burned from the close work, from the fumes, from the tears he refused to shed. He did everything he could to not think about Iris. It didn't work. Her words played on repeat in his mind, a loop he couldn't escape. "I'm tired of pretending I started falling for you." This was supposed to stay simple. The workshop felt too quiet, too empty. He'd gotten used to her presence over the past 2 weeks. The way she'd sit in the armchair near the window, reading while he worked. The way she'd ask questions about the dyes, about the restoration process, genuinely curious. The way she'd bring him coffee without being asked, somehow knowing exactly when he needed it. Now the armchair sat empty. The silence pressed against his eardrums. He'd wanted simple, safe. A way to prove he'd moved on without actually risking his heart. 2 weeks of pretending, and then back to the comfortable numbness he'd built around himself after Vanessa left. But Iris had seen through it from the beginning, had seen him the fear, the insecurity, the deep bone-level belief that he wasn't enough. And instead of using that knowledge to protect herself, she'd chosen him anyway. Over and over, defended him, protected him, stood beside him when he was too paralyzed by his own wounds to stand on his own, and he'd frozen. When Philip had asked that question, when the trap had closed around him, when he should have fought back or said something, anything, he'd just stood there, silent, proving every doubt Philip had. Iris had saved him again, kissed him in front of everyone, not because it was part of the act, but because she'd meant it. And afterward, when she'd finally told him the truth, when she'd laid her heart bare and asked if he was ready for something real, he'd said, this was supposed to stay simple. The memory made him sick. On the 4th day, Rowan stood in his workshop, staring at the leather journal he'd given her. He'd made a second one for himself at the same time, intending to document restoration techniques, to keep notes on dye formulas and binding methods. He opened it now. The pages were blank, waiting. His chest ached. He picked up a pen. His hand hovered over the first page, trembling slightly. Then he wrote, "I don't know how to do this. How to want something real without being terrified it'll be taken away. Vanessa didn't just leave. She made me believe I wasn't worth choosing. That my work, my life, my love, none of it was impressive enough to keep. She looked at me the day she told me about Philip and said, 'You're a good man, Rowan, but I need more than good.' I've carried that with me for 3 years. More than good. Like being good, being kind, being genuine. Like none of it mattered if I couldn't also be impressive. Successful in the way she wanted, wealthy enough, connected enough, important enough. And when Iris offered to help me, I told myself it was just pretending, that I could keep my distance, that 2 weeks wouldn't change anything, that I could use her kindness to prove a point, and then go back to being alone. But she changed everything. She saw the parts of me I've been trying to hide. The fear, the insecurity, the belief that I'll never be enough. The way I flinch when people ask about my work, waiting for the inevitable dismissal. The way I hold myself back. Never quite letting anyone close enough to see how much I'm still bleeding from wounds I pretend have healed. And instead of walking away, she defended me, protected me, chose me over and over. At the dinner when Philip tried to make me feel small, she spoke up. Not just about my work, but about me, about integrity, about creating things that matter. At the gala when Camille tried to diminish everything I do, Iris stood her ground. Didn't let them reduce me to their narrow definitions of worth. At the market, when Philip pushed and prodded, she stayed beside me. her hand in mine, choosing me publicly, until I proved her worst fear right, that she'd always be second. That I wasn't ready to let go of my past enough to see what was right in front of me. That she'd be the safe choice while I worked through my feelings about someone else. I was wrong. She's not second. She's not a placeholder. She's not the safe choice. She's the first person who's made me believe I might actually be worth loving. The first person who's seen all of me. The broken parts and the afraid parts and the parts I'm ashamed of. And stayed anyway. And I let her walk away because I was too scared to say it. Too scared to tell her that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, I fell in love with her. That her kindness wasn't just helping me get through social events. It was teaching me how to breathe again. How to hope again. That when she kissed me at the brunch, when she saved me from humiliation one more time, all I could think was that I didn't deserve her. That eventually she'd realize it too. That it was better to end it now, to go back to simple and safe, than to fall completely and have her leave, when she figured out I was never going to be impressive enough. He set the pen down, his hand shaking, his vision blurred. The words on the page swam. Then he closed the journal and stood, his legs unsteady. He knew what he had to do. The question was whether he was brave enough to do it. Whether he could walk into her shop and tell her the truth, that he loved her. That he was terrified. That he didn't know how to be enough, but he wanted to try for her. His throat tightened. His chest felt hollow. But the alternative, spending the rest of his life without her, feeling this emptiness expand until it swallowed everything good, that was worse than any fear. He grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. Rowan drove to Iris's bookshop just before closing. The streets were quiet, the late afternoon sun turning everything amber. He parked outside and sat for a moment, his heart hammering. Then he got out and walked to the door. Through the window, he could see her behind the counter. She was wrapping a book for a customer, her movements careful and practiced. She looked tired, thinner maybe. Like the past week had hollowed something out of her too. The customer left. Iris locked the door behind them, flipping the sign to closed. Rowan knocked. She turned, surprise flickered across her face. Then something else. Wariness, pain. She crossed to the door but didn't unlock it. "What are you doing here?" "I need to talk to you, Rowan." "I can't, please." His voice cracked. "Just 5 minutes. Then I'll leave if you want me to." She hesitated. Then she unlocked the door and stepped aside. He entered. The shop smelled like old paper and her perfume, faint and familiar. 5 minutes, she said quietly. He turned to face her. "I'm sorry," she wrapped her arms around herself. "For what?" "For freezing. For making you think you were second. For not being brave enough to tell you the truth." "What truth?" Her voice was flat. "That I'm terrified." The words came out in a rush. "That you're right. That I've spent 3 years believing I'm not enough. That Vanessa was right to leave. That my work, my life, everything about me is small. Unremarkable." Iris's expression softened, just slightly. "And when you defended me," he continued, "when you stood up for me in ways no one ever has, it broke something in me. Because you saw all the parts I've been ashamed of, and you didn't flinch. You didn't try to change me or fix me. You just stayed." His throat burned. "Until I gave you a reason not to. Rowan, I know I hurt you. I know I made you feel like what we had wasn't real. But it was. It is. You're not a placeholder, Iris. You're not second. You're the first person who's made me believe I might actually deserve to be loved." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "Then why did you let me walk away?" "Because I was scared." His voice broke. "Because wanting you feels like standing on the edge of a cliff. One wrong step and I lose everything. And now," she whispered, "now I'm more scared of losing you than I am of falling." The silence that followed was heavy. Iris wiped at her eyes, her hands shaking. "I can't be your way of proving you've moved on. I can't be the woman you choose because she's safe and easy and won't leave you the way Vanessa did. You're not." He stepped closer. "You're the woman I choose because you see me, the real me. And you make me want to be brave enough to believe I'm worthy of being seen." Her breath hitched. "I don't have this figured out," he said quietly. "I don't know how to stop being afraid. But I know I don't want to spend another day without you. Without your kindness. Without your strength. Without you." Iris looked at him for a long moment, searching his face. Then she said, so quietly he almost missed it, "I'm scared too. I know. I'm scared of being second again. Of waiting for you to realize I'm not enough. You are enough." He reached for her hands. She let him take them. "You're everything." She closed her eyes. Tears streaked her face. "I don't know if I can do this." "Then let me show you." His voice was rough. Let me prove that this is real. That you're not second, that I choose you. Not because it's convenient, because I can't imagine choosing anyone else. Her eyes opened. They were red, raw, full of hope and fear, in equal measure. Okay, she whispered. Okay. She nodded. But if you hurt me again, I won't. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. I swear I won't. She exhaled shakily. Then her arms came around him, holding him tight. They stood there wrapped in each other, the bookshop quiet around them, and for the first time in years, Rowan felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. 2 weeks later, Rowan and Iris walked through the botanical dye gardens at Hartwell Estate. The late spring afternoon was warm, sunlight filtering through young leaves and turning everything golden. The air was heavy with the scent of blooming woad and lavender, earthy and sweet, mixing with the mineral smell of damp soil from the morning's watering. Iris's hand was in his, her fingers laced through his, palm warm against his palm. They moved slowly, pausing to examine plants, to breathe deeply, to simply be together. No rush, no destination, just presence. The weight of her hand in his felt necessary now, like breathing. 2 weeks since he'd shown up at her bookshop, rain-soaked and terrified, and laid his heart bare. 2 weeks since she'd said okay. Since she'd agreed to try to trust him, to believe that this time he meant it. 2 weeks of learning how to do this, how to be vulnerable, how to let someone in without armor, how to choose love over fear every single day. I never asked, Iris said quietly, her thumb brushing the back of his hand. What happened with Philip and Vanessa? After the brunch, Rowan smiled slightly, the memory no longer carrying the sting it once did. Vanessa called. A few days after, apologized actually, said Philip had been difficult, that she didn't realize how much he'd been pushing, how uncomfortable he'd made things, and Iris looked up at him, her hazel eyes warm in the afternoon light. And I told her I appreciated the apology, that I understood, but that I'd moved on, that I was happy. He squeezed her hand gently. Genuinely happy. Iris stopped walking, turned to face him fully, her expression suddenly serious, searching. Are you happy? He stopped too, let go of her hand, only to reach up and frame her face with both of his hands. His palms cradled her cheeks, his thumbs brushing her cheekbones, tracing the delicate bones beneath soft skin. Yes, he said simply. Honestly. The word carrying the weight of everything he'd discovered in the past 2 weeks. Happier than I've been in years? She smiled. Small but genuine, reaching her eyes, making them crinkle at the corners in a way that made his chest warm. He leaned in, his lips finding hers. The kiss was slow, deep, deliberate, full of everything he'd been too afraid to say before. Thank you for staying. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for being brave enough for both of us. Until I could be brave too. When they pulled apart, both slightly breathless faces flushed. Iris's eyes were bright, shining with tears she didn't try to hide. I love you, she said. The words came out clear, certain, no hesitation, no fear. The words landed in his chest, warm and certain, settling into spaces that had been cold and empty for so long he'd forgotten what warmth felt like. I love you too, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I should have said it sooner, at the bookshop, when you first agreed to try, but I was scared. I know. She touched his face gently, her fingers tracing his jawline with tenderness. We both were, and now I'm still scared. Her smile turned sad, honest, but I'm more scared of losing this. Losing you. Of not trying because I was too afraid of getting hurt. I'd rather be afraid with you than safe without you. He kissed her again, longer this time, deeper. His hands moved to her waist, pulling her closer, eliminating the space between them. She melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck, her fingers threading into his hair, her body fitting against his like they'd been designed for exactly this. The garden was quiet around them, just the rustle of leaves and the gentle breeze, the distant hum of bees moving from flower to flower, the soft sound of water trickling through the irrigation channels between the plant beds. When they finally broke apart, both breathing harder, both trembling slightly, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. His eyes closed, his hand steady on her waist, anchoring them both. Stay with me, he whispered against her lips. Not for show, not for pretend, not to prove anything to anyone. Just stay, please. I'm not going anywhere, she said softly, her breath warm against his mouth. I promise, he believed her. For the first time since Vanessa left, since he'd built walls around his heart and convinced himself that being alone was safer than being vulnerable. He believed that someone could choose him and mean it, could stay and mean it, could love him and mean it. They walked back to the workshop hand in hand, their steps synchronized, comfortable, like they'd been walking together for years instead of weeks. Inside, Iris settled into the worn armchair near the window, the one she'd claimed as hers over the past 2 weeks. The leather was soft with age, cracked in places, comfortable in the way only old things can be. Rowan moved to check the dye vats, adjusting temperatures with practiced ease, stirring gently with the long wooden paddle. The familiar motions grounding him in this moment, in this life he was building with her. "Can I ask you something?" Iris said from the chair, her voice thoughtful. "Anything that first day at the wedding?" "Why did you look at me when Vanessa's mother asked if you were alone?" He paused, his hand stilling on the vat lid. "I don't know. You'd been kind to me earlier with the napkin. And when she asked that question, when I felt myself falling apart, you were the only person in that whole garden who felt safe." Iris's expression softened. "I'm glad I was there, so am I." He crossed to her, pulling her to her feet. His hands found hers, their fingers intertwining. "I don't know what I did to deserve you," he said quietly. "You were yourself." She squeezed his hands. "That's all you've ever had to be." His chest tightened. He kissed her again, slow and tender, pouring everything he felt into it. And for the first time, he wasn't afraid. 6 months later, autumn painted the Hudson Valley in shades of amber and crimson and burnt orange. The trees surrounding Hartwell Estate blazed with color, leaves drifting down in lazy spirals to carpet the ground. The air had turned crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke from the main house's fireplace and the earthy richness of harvest. Rowan stood in the botanical dye garden, a basket of freshly harvested madder root in his hands, dirt under his fingernails, his breath visible in the cool morning air. The plants had done well this year, better than expected. The roots were thick, healthy, perfect for creating the deep red dyes he specialized in. The workshop door opened with its familiar creak. Iris stepped out, wrapped in one of his thick wool sweaters that hung almost to her knees, 2 mugs of coffee steaming in her hands. Her hair was still messy from sleep, her feet bare despite the cold ground, and she'd never looked more beautiful. "Thought you could use this," she said, crossing to him carefully, mindful of the irrigation channels and plant rows. "Thank you." He set the basket down and took the mug, his fingers brushing hers, still thrilling at the simple contact even after months of waking up beside her. "You didn't have to come out here. It's cold." "I know," she smiled, leaning into his side. "But the bed's too big without you." His chest warmed. She'd moved into the estate 3 months ago, slowly, carefully bringing her life into his space, until it became their space. Her books filled the shelves in the main house, spines worn and loved, mixing with his reference volumes on restoration techniques and botanical dyes. Her vintage teacups claimed a shelf in the kitchen. Her laughter filled rooms that had been silent for too long, echoing off the old beams and making the house feel alive again. They'd turned one of the upstairs rooms into a reading nook for her, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a deep window seat overlooking the gardens. She'd spend hours there on rainy afternoons, curled up with rare volumes, occasionally reading passages aloud to him, while he worked on leather samples at the table nearby. It was the kind of domestic peace Rowan had never imagined having, the kind he'd thought was only for other people, people who were impressive enough, successful enough. "I have something for you," Rowan said, setting his mug carefully on the edge of a raised bed. Iris raised an eyebrow, her hazel eyes catching the morning light. "It's not even my birthday." "I know." He pulled a small, wrapped package from his jacket pocket, the paper slightly crumpled from being carried close to his chest all morning while he worked. She took it carefully, her eyes curious, that small smile playing at her lips. She unwrapped it slowly, the way she did everything, with attention and care. Inside was a leather bookmark, dyed deep forest green with gold tooling that matched the journal he'd given her months ago. But this one had words stamped along the edge in delicate letters. She read them aloud, her voice soft, catching slightly. "For the woman who taught me, I was always enough." Her eyes filled with tears. She looked up at him, her expression breaking open. "Rowan, I mean it." He stepped closer, his hands finding her waist, steadying her, anchoring them both. "You gave me something I didn't know I needed. Not just kindness, not just patience, but the courage to believe I was worth choosing, worth loving." That my life, my work, my love, all of it was enough exactly as it was. She set the bookmark down carefully on the edge of the raised bed, beside his coffee mug, and wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling herself close. You were always worth choosing, always enough. You just needed someone to see it who wasn't, measuring you against impossible standards. I know that now. He kissed her forehead, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, lavender, and something clean. Then her cheeks soft and cool from the autumn air, the corner of her mouth tasting coffee and home. Because you chose me every day. Even when I didn't make it easy. Even when I was afraid and pulled back, you're worth the difficulty, he said with a small smile, her fingers threading into his hair. Besides, you make really excellent coffee. He laughed, the sound genuine and light and surprised. She made him laugh now. Often the workshop wasn't silent anymore. Neither was his life. They stood there in the garden, the autumn sun climbing higher, warm on their shoulders despite the chill in the air. The scent of drying herbs hung heavy, mixing with fresh earth and fallen leaves. In the distance, birds called to each other, preparing for winter. I love you, Rowan, said quietly, the words coming easier now, natural, necessary. I love you too, Iris said, her voice equally soft. He kissed her then, slow and deep and full of promise. The kind of kiss that said, this isn't pretend, this is forever. This is the life we're building together, one quiet day at a time. When they pulled apart, Iris looked up at him, her eyes bright, a question forming. So, what are we doing for Thanksgiving? Because my mother's already asking if we're coming to Boston, and I told her I'd check with you first. Rowan smiled. He'd met Iris's mother via video call last month. A kind woman, sharp-witted and warm, who'd looked at him through the screen and said, "You make my daughter happy. That's all I need to know." It had been the simplest approval he'd ever received. The most meaningful will go, he said. I'd like to meet her in person. And your brother. She's going to love you. Iris touched his face gently, her thumb brushing his cheekbone. She already does, actually. She keeps asking when we're visiting. You think? I know. Her smile widened, because I do. She trusts my judgment. Plus, I told her about the bookmark you made me. The journal. She said, any man who makes things with his hands for the woman he loves is worth keeping. His chest filled with warmth, with certainty, with something that felt dangerously close to peace. Complete peace for the first time in years. They walked back to the workshop together, hands intertwined, their steps synchronized. The morning stretched ahead full of simple domestic rhythms. Coffee, breakfast, work, lunch together in the garden, if the weather held. More work, dinner. Reading side by side in the evening while the fire crackled. The kind of ordinary, beautiful life he'd stopped believing he deserved. Inside the workshop, Iris settled into her armchair, pulling a book from the stack she kept there. Rowan returned to his workbench, his hands finding the familiar tools, the leather he'd been restoring. And Rowan realized, not for the first time, but with fresh clarity, that he'd finally found what he'd been searching for all along. Not someone to prove he'd moved on from Vanessa. Not someone to make him look impressive or successful or worthy in other people's eyes, but someone to move forward with. Someone who saw him completely, the broken parts and the afraid parts, and the parts he was still learning to be proud of, and chose him anyway. Someone worth choosing in return. Every single day, someone who'd offered kindness when he was bleeding, and then stayed to help him heal. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a like and subscribe. It costs nothing and means everything for the channel. I'd love to hear from you. On a scale of 0 to 10, how did this story make you feel? I'm truly grateful you're here. See you in the next story.